including plans to sue. For more details on the Netflix deal, that's the next permutation of the saga. Joining us right now is Tom Rogers, former NBC cable president, CNBC contributor, and senior advisor to CNBC parent company Versant. He writes in his latest op-ed, quote, "Does it really matter who ends up owning Warner Brothers?" So that's the question in the morning. And Tom, let's start there, and maybe you can answer it yourself.
Well, good morning, Andrew. I looked at this from many angles, looked at it from a viewer's point of view, from the industry point of view, from policymakers' point of view, even President Trump's point of view. And I really came away that there's no compelling reason one way or the other that overall one owner of Warner is a better outcome for all those constituents than another owner. Each has its own pluses and minuses. Obviously, the shareholders of the three companies, it matters to. But more broadly, I don't think it really matters who ends up winning this fight.
So you don't think, in Hollywood, as you know, there's a big debate about what's going to happen to the future of the film business, what's going to happen to the idea of people going to theaters and cinema. And there's one view that says that David Ellison is a big fan of films, loves films, and would keep that business alive. There's another that says that Netflix, at least historically, has been anti-theater, more trying to get people in home. They've said that they're going to continue to support the theater, but I think there's some people who just don't believe them. Does that piece of this matter to you one way or the other?
Well, each side has a viewpoint. I come out that, look, if Paramount wins, there's going to be one less studio. There's going to be a consolidation there between Warner and Paramount. There's going to be a lot more job loss relative to the industry in terms of that metric of how the industry comes out. In terms of theatrical distribution, yes, Netflix has cared a lot less about getting movies in theaters, but they also haven't had much impact as a provider of movies relative to the originals that they produce in terms of TV series. And yet they do very well when it comes to licensed movies, movies that have had the promotion of theatrical release that they then license for their distribution. I don't see any reason when they're owning a studio that's in the business of promoting theatrical release and those types of movies do so well on streaming that they wouldn't have every incentive to continue to drive that kind of theatrical business. So there are arguments both ways, but on that count, I don't see a winner.
Let's play the board. I want to put you on the board of Warner Brothers Discovery right now. To the extent that you think there is a way to get a higher price that's acceptable to you, is there? Because one of the things that's happened right now is you've had this board say, look, we're nervous, we're anxious about the economics and the debt that's being put on this business in the context of the offer that's put forward by Paramount right now. And so there's a question mark about, if they did offer more, how, if you're the board and you've publicly said we're worried about their economics, how you could feel more comfortable about their economics. And then there's the question, of course, about the regulatory scheme. There's also the flip side, which is, do you think Netflix would come back? And what would you do if you were running either of those companies?
Well, you're getting now into the shareholder. Does it matter to the shareholders? And yes, it matters very much to the shareholders of Warner as well as to the other two companies. I was mostly analyzing this from the point of view of the other constituencies. But putting myself in a board position, I'm at Warner. And yes, they have legitimate concerns. Larry Ellison has backstopped the equity part of the Paramount bid. But you have this huge amount of debt, which is going to be cause Paramount to be leveraged 9 times at close. Obviously, a lot of synergies and job loss that bring that down, but a lot of things could happen over the course of a year before this deal closes that could create a situation where the creditors get antsy about the deal and the financing isn't there at close. But at the same time, I'd have to give Paramount somewhat of an edge over Netflix when it comes to regulatory approval, not so much from the federal government of the United States, but when it comes to European countries and state AGs, Netflix probably has a tougher regulatory road. So I think if you're a Warner board, you're looking at risks in either direction. And as a result, they obviously are looking out for shareholders by saying, hey, if you got a higher bid, Paramount, let's hear it. And it's a little weird that Paramount has said they'd never put forward their best and highest in terms of a final offer. It hasn't come forward yet. You'd expect it would by this point, but we'll see. I guess
so what do you
there's still
think
more
is
to
going to
come.
happen now? But play it out at this point. You know, you have this threat of a lawsuit happening here. You have the prospect they could come back with a higher bid. There's no reason for Netflix right now to put together a higher bid because they got to wait to see what Paramount is or is not going to do. There may be no incentive to do anything for the next month or two before you get closer to the shareholder a vote on something like this. What would you be doing?
If I was Netflix, I was the Warner board, or I was Paramount.
I want you to put all three hats on. You know, in concurrent, not concurrently, just one at a time.
Well, I think there's already been some noise out of Warner shareholders, big institutional shareholders, that they do like the price of the Paramount deal. And I think if Paramount did raise its bid without a countermove by Netflix, that may well clinch in its direction. Certainly Warner has been saying, hey, you got some risks here, but a higher price may do it for you. When it comes to Netflix, I do what they're doing and obviously wait, as you suggest. Warner is not putting forward frivolous objections. They obviously have legitimate concerns about how highly leveraged Paramount would be. That is a hard one to cure. So leaning on it as heavily as they are, I'm not sure how anybody backstops the debt side of the equation here, given how it is possible over the course of a year, given macro issues, that Paramount could end up with a situation where the debt financing is harder to deal with at close. I think this is still a fluid situation, and I would expect, given that Paramount hasn't yet come forward with what it said was its best and final, to see one more move there, and that will probably catalyze at least one more move from Netflix, would be my guess right now.
Let me just throw one last piece at you. I'm curious what you think the other chess moves on the table are during this process, after this process. We just had Mike Cavanaugh on, who runs Comcast, NBC Universal. And there's been a big question about what happens to a Peacock, for example. There's still a number of other media assets, and I just out there that people have talked about consolidation. And I wonder whether you think just everything is on pause for however long this takes, which is not just going to be the process of getting to whoever wins this battle, but then imagine another maybe 18-month regulatory review. Does everybody just sit frozen? Because the other piece of this is politically, you don't know what's on the other side of it later for the other players.
Well, I think things are frozen for a while because I think Paramount is the player that needs a solution more than anybody else out there. And as long as they're pursuing this solution, it's hard to see that they're a free agent to come up with a second play. If Netflix does win this, I don't think it's impossible that Paramount still picks up the cable side of the Warner assets. I think that there's obviously an enormous amount of synergy for them to be able to consolidate the Paramount cable networks along with CNN and CBS News with the Warner cable assets. And that's one of the reasons that I'm not sure President Trump, not that his inclinations here should decide anything, but clearly is interested in another owner of CNN. And I think he has a relatively benign outlook toward Netflix winning because Netflix isn't going to end up owning CNN, and Paramount might own the Warner assets and consolidate CBS News and CNN, even if they lose the HBO Warner Studio fight.
Fair enough. Tom, I want to thank you, as always, for your perspective on all of the goings-on in the middle of what has turned out to be quite the soap opera. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it is 8 a.m. on the East Coast, and you're watching Squawk Box right here on CNN.